Hey everyone, Brendan Sander here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Peter Gabriel album called I.O. It is his first new album of original material in 21 years. I'm super excited about it. 10th studio album from him as a solo artist. And we're going to get into that, break it all down here, do an unboxing and everything in just a bit. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel and I greatly appreciate it. Of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you're going to stay up to date on everything going on in the world of music, just like this with a review for the brand new Peter Gabriel album called I.O. And so I want to give you guys a little bit of history, a little bit of background here as it ties into future things I'm going to talk about when I break down the album here. As most of you know, he rose to fame as the original lead vocalist of the rock band Genesis and formed that group in 1967. So he's been going on now 56 years in the music industry. And Peter Gabriel has released, or did release, 6 albums with Genesis before going solo in 1975. Now, his debut solo album came out in 1977, a few years later after that, with the first 4 of them being self-titled releases, and then ultimately they were named after their album covers. So debut album became Car, that was 77, Scratch, 78, Melt, which happens to be my favorite one, that was 1980, and then Security. Never really knew why that was the name of this one here. Maybe one of you guys could tell me, but it's 1982. And certainly while he experienced significant success from those first 4 albums, it would be the next one, So from 1986, where he just totally exploded, going into the stratosphere, certainly helpful with the single Sledgehammer that came off of it, which went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 here in the US at least, helping the album to go on to sell 5 million copies. And that, of course, would kick off a trend where he began naming the albums as 2-letter words at that point. So we had So, but then we get Us in 1992. We later get Up in 2002, leading to the one we're going to be talking about, I.O. 2 letters, but the title and meaning of what I.O. is actually means input output. It is a computer term that I, of course, later found out once I got the album and was able to listen to that track. But all in all, 10 albums, solo albums, including I.O., which we're going to talk about here. And as I said, 21 years between the previous album, Up, and what we're going to talk about here today. So lots of growth and everything between those albums. Now, in the intervening years, he did release soundtrack albums and singles from soundtracks, so it wasn't completely dormant and not doing anything. Ones I didn't talk about there as new original music, he did release a covers album and an orchestrated album reimagining his own songs. So again, other stuff happening within there. But as I said, we're here to talk about this album, I.O. So 10th studio album. Now, 14th album if you include the 4 soundtracks that he did, but actually only the 8th album of new original songs, and 20th album overall if we throw in everything, including the 6 from Genesis. Of course, that's all during his 56 years as a recording artist. Now, I.O. has 12 tracks on it, but it does feature 2 mixes on it. So this version here, at least with the CD, does come with the 2 different mixes of the album, the bright side and the dark side mixes. He had 2 different people do those for him on it. Overall, the album itself is 68 minutes long, and it's his longest album to date. Now, those 2 different mixes that are on here are very subtle in my opinion, but noticeable. It does give you a bit of fun to be able to pop on one disc and get to know that very well, as I did, given the first 4 or 5 listens through with the bright side before I switched over, because I wanted to really know the songs before I tried to listen for differences within them in terms of the mixes. But all in all, I think I'm gravitating towards the bright side. And again, that might just be with the fact that I probably listened to that version more than the dark side. But as I said, a bit of fun with the album, having that to listen to. Now, the album itself has been in development for nearly 3 decades, going back to 1995 when Peter Gabriel first started work on tracks that would later turn up on this. Ultimately, the album was slated for 2004, so it would have been a follow-up 2 years after the album Up. But now, with it being released here in 2023, it is nearly 20 years overdue that people have been waiting for this album. I have to say, all in all, I didn't know a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff on the album, so I wasn't really sitting around waiting, because we know it takes Peter Gabriel a long time between albums. But finding that out after the fact, a little okay for me. But if I'd actually been one of the ones sitting around waiting for those 20 years, that could be pretty painful, much like me sitting around waiting for new Guns N' Roses stuff and how long that has taken. All right, beginning though January 6th of 2023, Peter Gabriel began releasing one new song from the album every full moon, and I think that was pretty cool, culminating, of course, with its release on December 1st when this album came out. And whether or not there's any connection here or not, the name Io is one of Jupiter's moons, and so the fact that he was releasing one song with every full moon, I like that coincidence and or connection, although as I later found out, the Io is actually related to technology and computer terminology, where it means input, output, as of course the title track itself signifies. So unlike most of you out there, with the songs being dropped like that every full moon, I did listen to the first single, Panopticom, when it was released, but I decided to wait to listen to this whole album until it dropped on December 1st. So I didn't want to get the album piecemeal. I like to digest my albums in whole when I get them. So I'll usually only listen to one, maybe 2 singles, and then wait for the rest of it. That's what I did with this. But I have to say, I liked the novel approach that he did with it, the timing of it, how he chose to release it. It kept the album itself and his name, the songs, all that sort of stuff in the public's eye for the last 12 months, where making this past year of 2023 all about Peter Gabriel. So even with the album dropping now, where I think he's probably getting the most attention for, he's had it almost every month going through due to dropping a new song, then dropping different mixes of those new songs, and that was a lot of cool things going on. Now, of course, that was very hard for me to hold back, to not listen to the album until I got it. And so going forward in this review here, I'm actually deeming this the tale of 2 reviews, because my initial opinion on the album has dramatically changed from when I first listened to it. So I want to start with review number 1, which was my initial listen of this album. And when I did this, I oftentimes make notes during my listens, and so that's why I'm able to go back to this now and say, wow, it's wildly different in that I very much liked the opening 2 songs that when I first heard the album, but I felt that it fell off pretty quickly thereafter. And I thought at the time that it really would have benefited the album to have had an alternate running order, and was feeling myself sort of longing for the bright side and the dark side mixes to actually have different running orders, where I could have really experienced the album differently. And I could still stand by that, but I have since changed my opinion on the fact of the album needing a different running order. And so for me, at least up front, I found the album missing some key elements within it, at least things that I relate to Peter Gabriel, like those omnipresent world music sounds that he has integrated in so often. I felt that the slower, more mellow tracks that were on here didn't stand out as much. I felt there were more than there actually turned out to be. And again, deeper listens and dives into it helped me to understand why that was my initial reaction, when really not the case here. And initially, I thought that the album would have a hard time finding a place within his stellar catalog, that I think each album is a standout piece, and a statement all in its own here. I just thought that, it was not going to necessarily be an album that would hold up over time. What I did find was that I really just needed my anticipation of the 21 years that I had waited for a new Peter Gabriel album to sort of wear off, which it did after a second and third listen and so forth. So I then give you review number 2, which were later listens to the album and where I'm standing today, now having given this quite a few listens. So the album, I find, is more orchestral at times than previous albums, and definitely mixing in elements of his soundtrack scores, which he's done, which I think is an interesting thing. Plus, we know that he did the 2 orchestral albums, the covers album and the reimagining of his own stuff. So that stuff being brought in here as well. And it totally makes sense because he's always kind of built each album on other albums, sounds and things that he's done, and he's grown from one to the other, which is why I wanted to talk about those 21 years in between Up versus I.O. So while there is less of that overall world music vibe or feel to this album, there's still just enough of it in there for what you would expect from Peter Gabriel. And the pace and flow of the album as a whole, I now find to be perfect the way that it is. There's a nice balance between the more upbeat, poppier songs that are on here versus the more mellow, slow numbers that are on here. And even those slower songs will tend to build by the end so that they make a really nice transition into that next song that could be that more upbeat song. So that's where it sort of caught me off guard in initial listens to the album, when I could really sit down with no distractions and just listen to this. I actually found that I really enjoyed it and could hear why it was sequenced the way that it was. So now, when comparing this to previous album Up from 2002, so 21 years back, gone are those modern elements that he brought in at that time, like drum loops, samples, things of that nature. And we've got more of a return to the upbeat, more poppy style song that became very popular for him in 86 and 92, around that time frame, making this album, for me at least, a much return to form kind of sounding album from him, and certainly a pleasant surprise after the 21 years. Whereas that first review, I didn't think I was going to enjoy this very much. I am now saying that it has been a pleasant surprise and I'm really enjoying it. So now 6, 7, 8 reviews on for this album. I'm really enjoying it. I do think that it's found a very nice home within his catalog as a place to live between all of his other albums. Not his best, but certainly not his worst. And of course, that's all relative because I don't think any of Gabriel's albums are actually bad albums. It's just which one is number 1 and which one is number 10, so to speak. And this one is falling almost in the middle for me. So I think it's worthy of the Peter Gabriel name. It's a great album. Let's talk about some of the standout tracks that are on this. First one up, track number 1, Panopticom. First single, this one here is a fantastic mid-paced song. Great way to open up the album. When I heard this, and I really did like it when he released this back last January. And for me at least, when I heard that and I thought, this is so good, I kind of don't want to taint by hearing the rest of the things and perhaps be disappointed. I wanted to go into this album knowing that I would enjoy it at least from the start. And so that was actually why I chose to stop listening to it. But I do find that the song Panopticom is sort of both new and fresh, but also reminiscent of past Peter Gabriel stuff. So you get that feeling of hearing something new, but at the same time knowing full well that it's clearly a Peter Gabriel track. Track 4, the title track, I.O. This one here is the one that revealed to me what the title was. Like I said, going into it, I made the connection to the moon of Jupiter and the fact that he was releasing songs on every full moon, and I thought that it had to do with that. Like I said, could be a coincidence, could actually be intended, who knows. Either way, I really liked this song. It was one of the first ones to jump out at me even during that very first listen. This was one that I enjoyed. Track number 6, Road to Joy. This one here is a fantastic song and one of several of the more upbeat, popular songs that have a very classic feel to it. And at this point, I really would not have expected to hear a song like this on one of his albums. I sort of thought he was, toning things down and slowing things up and going into a much different style than what we're getting here. And this one here has that classic sound of songs like Big Time, Sledgehammer, Shock the Monkey, and other tracks like those. There's a few others on the album like it. So unlike Up that only had a couple of these, there's far more songs like that on this album here. And another one to talk about is track 7 called So Much. It's one of the slower songs on the album, but it's so beautiful, and it just shows the many styles that Peter Gabriel has, and that he just really hasn't lost anything. He can do the poppy song, he can do the slow, beautiful ballad song, he can do the orchestrated song, the world music song, and so forth. And this one here, of the slower number songs, and I have to say, generally I usually like the popular upbeat songs, I was pleasantly surprised that I was even enjoying this one so much, making it a standout song for me. But let's take a look at the album. So front cover, as always with Peter Gabriel, you get some real interesting photography on this. The way that he's got his hands placed, but we still see his face through it. Now, he did talk about wanting to merge imagery and art with each one of these tracks. So as I'll show you in the booklet, there is special art created for each one of these, and I'm sure the album art front cover like this was certainly meant to have that thought and character behind it. There's the back side of it, track listing out. I always much prefer when they just list them straight along like that, but they do a good job here. It's nice and bold, and I can follow it fairly easy, and I do like the way they make those two images there. I did notice, and if I can find it here really quickly, that the eye has the same look as this album here, which is the New Blood album. So I kind of thought that was cool, and of course that sort of looks like a CD, maybe even more than a record. I like to think that as a CD collector, but either way, just nice the way they chose to do that. We get that world label thing that he does on his modern reissues of these albums and ones going forward. And then as we get inside, we get into some interesting art and things that are inside there. The booklet is in this first part. We get the bright side that is in the middle, and we get the dark side that is over here. There's no additional sleeve or anything, just the disc, each one in here like so. But that's typical for CDs. And let me pull out the booklet here. I also wanted to show you the sort of Japanese cover strip that'll go over these things. I was sort of wishing that the album cover actually kept that orange label on it like it did, but that came off, so it now slides inside for me. And here we go. We get some beautiful art with this thing, kicking things off here. I mean, that in and of itself could have been the album cover. And he starts off and he talks a little bit about that art in there, and then we get into what became the single covers for each of them, but an individual piece of art created by lots of different artists. So you get the art, plus you get the lyrics side by side, where you can have something in this day and age where everything is digital. You can actually have a thing to sit back and stare at that piece of art while listening to the song. And I think that that is such a critical thing these days, where everything is digital and online and on the go. I still love my physical format, and the fact that there is a piece of art that is meant to create some new thought or idea about that song, going along with each one all the way until the last one. And this one here, just released right before the drop of the album. You got that song and that piece of art with it, and then in the backside, credits and other things along with it. A nice shot there of Peter Gabriel going along with the cover that's on the front side of this here. So bottom line, on the album itself, while the album didn't initially connect to me, when I first listened to it, it has grown on me considerably. So I have found that the album has a lot of depth in it, and each listen, I'm finding new things within it. And I really like albums like these that continue to grow on me with each listen. I am so grateful that at this point in Peter Gabriel's career, he's 73 years old, we are getting one of his best works, in my opinion. As I said, neither the best and nor the worst, but it is a great album that falls right midline throughout his catalog, in my opinion. And so if you're a lot like me, where maybe that initial listen didn't jive with you, it didn't connect with you, or didn't just immediately scream out that this was a great album, go back, give it another listen, give it another chance. I think it'll be well worth it. Certainly after 21 years, you kind of got to shake off, the cobwebs and everything of what your expectations of Peter Gabriel are, and just hear the album for what it is. I don't think you'll want to pass this one by. All right, so there you go. That is my review for the brand new Peter Gabriel album, I.O. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the review, learned something out of it, and or helped you decide if you want to go pick it up or not. As I said, at a minimum, go give it a listen. You never know. And let me know your thoughts on the album, how you feel it is, and or where you think it might place within his catalog. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.